All right, guys, hope you're all happy and well. I'm going to do a video today off the back of a podcast that I saw yesterday with Rio Ferdinand. Just in case you don't know Rio Ferdinand, he is an ex-footballer, played for England, played for Manchester United when they were at their absolute peak a few years back. And he was talking about how he developed as a footballer, how he developed, as a father and as a husband, and now as a businessman and stuff like that. And he was talking about how he's gone about doing that, and I thought it was really interesting because I've done similar in my life now, which I wasn't doing when I was competing in judo. And I'll tell you exactly what that was in a short while. But what I used to do when I used to compete in judo was to look at my favorite competitors, my favorite players who I used to look up to, the people I used to admire, and I used to literally just try and emulate them. I used to try and do what they did, throw like they did, move like they did, and I was always just a copy of, or a poor copy, a poor kind of imitation of what they were. I had some success. I definitely had some success. But when I found that it wasn't working perfectly, I'd then move on and I'd then try and look at somebody else and I'd try and be like them and try and, just mirror them. And what I found is that it never really quite worked. But the problem was I was never able to really find who I was exactly. I was always just trying to be like other people. I never really knew who I was. And I was never a true version of myself. But obviously going forward, sort of later on as a coach and as a husband, father, just as a man in general, what I try and do now is I try to take on the kind of the same sort of beliefs and the way that Rio Ferdinand is going about things. And that's also similar. I kind of got this originally maybe from Bruce Lee. Okay, now what he used to say was that he used to take bits from all different martial arts, and he'd take the bits that were good and he'd leave the bits he didn't like, and he would add his own bits to it. And that's pretty much what Rio Ferdinand was saying in terms of, when he was playing for Manchester United, he used to look at the other players who he used to look up to and the people who he wanted to be like. He'd look at Roy Keane and think he's a great leader, and he'd try and take his leadership traits. And then he'd look at Ryan Giggs and look at how he recovered and look at how he'd maybe sort of bring other things in like yoga and stuff like that. And he'd look at Paul Scholes and look at how he was always consistent in training and how he worked really hard. And he'd look at all the players and he'd pick out all their strengths and he'd try and add all those people's strengths and try to be as much like them as he could. But he wouldn't just look at one person, he'd look at the strengths in everyone, and he'd try and add all of those things to his game. And then on top of that, he would then add his own things, just like Bruce Lee said, just like I'm trying to do now. So I try and do the same thing. Back when I was a player, I was trying to be like this player, and then that didn't quite work. So I was then trying to be like this player, and it doesn't really work out because you're a poor imitation all the time. And nowadays, as a coach, I look at all the coaches. As a husband, I look at all different, people who I know are husbands. As a father, I look at all the different people I know who are fathers. As leaders, I look at all the people who I know are good leaders. But I don't look at one. I always look at, things that I like. I take bits from everyone, and I leave the bits that I don't like, because not everyone's perfect. I'm not perfect, and nobody is. So if you try and be just like somebody, you might look at somebody who's just really disciplined and really perfect at being maybe a leader, and they're really disciplined in what they do and they never miss any sessions and they're always there, and that's great. But you quite often find then that person you really admire is having trouble with their relationships, or they're having trouble with their finances and stuff like that. And what you'll find quite often is that if you try and be just like them, you might be successful in some areas, but you're going to be unsuccessful in other areas. So the key really is to kind of take the good bits from each person, and the bits that you don't like about that person you leave behind, and then add the bits that are your unique bits that you can kind of bring in. So people then think, you know, you put that all together and it becomes the real you, the most perfect person that you can be. Now, we're never going to get perfection, and we don't ever really want to get perfection, because if we do, we stop growing. So we want to get as close as we can. And if you feel as though you are perfect, which probably you won't, but if you do, then just try and look at everything and look at where you can just add bits, and try and make it more perfect. So yeah, maybe that's a good idea. Try and think about how you can do those in different elements in your life, you know, and hopefully this has been a helpful video for you. And I'll make another video very shortly, I think. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, please subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers, guys.